Okay, you know you're probably losing your mind when you're standing out in your garage making videos for YouTube. But there's more and more Ron Paul videos on the web, and they're all accompanied by long scrolls of people agreeing with him, congratulating each other. And the trouble is that they exhibit a kind of a groupthink. It's very similar to the Freepers. Go to the Free Republic website, for example. So anyway, here's Ron Paul's platform. It's really quite mediocre. Just go to ronpaul2008.com and look for the issues. You know, so I'm just going to go into the anti-war thing. So I've been working for 5 years to try to stop this war. And overall, Ron Paul is offering a xenophobic construct of the world. It's an appeal to the ignorance and fears of Americans. Here he says, the war in Iraq was sold to us with false information. The area is more dangerous now than ever before. Thousands of people have been killed. Billions of dollars have been lost, and so forth. Now, the translation of this is that, the war's all screwed up. Ron Paul's mad about the lies. Basically, he's mad because the war was mismanaged. He's mad because the empire squandered its resources and the billions of dollars. Basically, he's mad about the outcome, okay? But never does he repudiate the doctrine of U.S. military control over the Persian Gulf oil. He never admits that destroying countries and killing people for oil is illegal under treaties or the Constitution, let alone morally wrong. Okay? And he goes on and he says, Jefferson and Washington warned us about entangling ourselves in the affairs of other nations. Today we have troops in 130 countries and so forth, and we need more troops to defend America. This is totally false. Nobody's attacking the United States. We're a nuclear-armed juggernaut. The draft issue that he raises is also a complete red herring. It's a falsehood. There's no cause for a draft. Why is he raising this? There's 1,000 other issues that more people are yelling about that Ron Paul doesn't even mention in his platform, such as healthcare, global warming, media reform. So anyway, his inclusion of this draft scare is just a red herring. Okay, so Ron Paul says we can either continue to fund and fight police actions around the world, or we can refocus on securing America. I mean, this is an amazing paragraph in which Ron Paul turns the world upside down. He says, under no circumstances should the U.S. again go to war as a result of a resolution from unelected foreign bodies such as the United Nations. I mean, this is amazing because he's turned the world upside down. He implies that the United Nations sent America to war in Iraq. The United Nations said no to war in Iraq. He says it without. He says that the U.S. government should only fight wars without consulting the UN. Basically, I mean, under the Constitution, treaties such as the UN treaty are ratified by Congress are binding on all Americans, including Ron Paul and George Bush and the Congress and everybody else. In the first sentence, Ron Paul is repudiating the concept of an international police. For example, to respond to 9/11 as a coordinated international police response, instead of attacking entire nations, Ron Paul repudiates that. Now, regardless of anything else that he says about being against war, his attitude and his policy makes war response the only outlet for American foreign policy. I'm not a happy camper. I'm not going to go along with this. Ron Paul says, too often we give foreign aid and intervene on behalf of governments that are despised. Then we too become despised. And then we have these people turn on us like the Kosovars who aid Islamic terrorists and blah, blah, blah. Ron Paul is very fast and loose in his use of the word us and we. But the U.S. government is not we. It is them. It is the corporate cronies of U.S. Congress who arrange these relationships with dictators around the world, not, quote, us. Ron Paul's platform on war and the military is unprincipled. It makes unilateral war inevitable because it doesn't repudiate war or limit war to the defense of U.S. jurisdiction, and it doesn't bring war under international bodies. So Ron Paul remains wedded to unilateral war. He never distinguishes between U.S. defense and the reality of all wars since World War II, which were not defensive. RP never mentions that the overall size of the military is 5 times the size we need for our legitimate defense. Instead, he repeats the lie that we must work on securing America, defending America, and so on. The only anti-war statement that he makes at all is that it ought to be approved by Congress. Well, that's pathetic because all the wars since World War II have mostly been approved by the Congress, and they've been supported by and ratified by funding. So the world that Ron Paul is selling the public is a comfortable little American zone where we'd all be even better off than we are already with America's share of the world's resources. And how will this be brought about in Ron Paul's world? Not by government, but by global corporations. So basically, he's abdicating from government. He's punting to the private sector. This is exactly congruent with handing over the economy to corporations. It removes any other power but corporations, and it reduces all policy matters to money. Now, to Ron Paul, being ruled by global corporations is preferable to rule by governments, under a theory that employees and so on are unconstrained just as much as the capitalists. And employees can keep whatever money and resources they earn by whatever means are allowed. Okay. Of course, it's well proven that owners have a disproportionate power over employees. But that's not the deeper problem. The deeper problem is the assumption that the principal parties in any business ought to be unconstrained and unaccountable to the broader society around them, namely the sick, the elderly, and so forth, the disabled, the young. So this is just a polite version of might makes right. Communist philosophers all over the world, also want the economy and the state to be run by committees. When committees run the economy, however, it always ends badly because of conflicts of interest. You end up with oligarchy. That's exactly what Ron Paul wants. He wants an oligarchy run by self-appointed committees, corporate boards of directors. Human progress generally advances when power is decentralized closer to individuals and small groups who know each other over generations with deep ties, intermarriage, and so on. And you get two things. You get real affection, for one thing, and you get real accountability. So the proper unit of legitimate power and legislation surely is no more than 100,000 people, and surely not 300 million. Human cooperation over such large numbers needs to be based on federation, the kinds of contracts and treaties among the groups, not among a flat democracy. The idea of a flat structure of 300 million people voting for a president, and this has been disastrous for many reasons. It's a scam, basically. Libertarians believe no government other than a police force to curb the most physical forms of crimes. A government role certainly is needed to protect the society from predatory businesses and criminals. So I agree with them on that. However, even libertarians can't achieve their ideals without a more substantial government. The populations of every developed country, including the United States, support a public sector that provides for the sick, the elderly, disabled, universal education, common spaces, such as parks, libraries, environmental protection, roads and transportation, and governance over their media, and so forth. This is a beefy public sector, folks, and this is what everybody in the world wants, except for the greedy few. Ron Paul's notions of government are really utopian, and they're quaint. He's a hard money libertarian, and to him, a world run by transnational corporations is freedom. Okay? So when we the people try to insist the country be run as a democracy by its government, instead of by the rich, libertarians howl about the loss of their freedoms. And when our government imposes a progressive income tax to recover a percentage of the money that was stolen by the powerful, these freedom people, who are invariably poor, by the way, and poorly educated, ironically, they argue to defend the interests of the powerful, the exploiters and tycoons. The powerful are always going to be among us, those most cunning, long of fang, fleet of foot, the brilliant roves, the Mike Tysons, the idiot savants on Wall Street. No wonder the Libertarian Party is so small. It doesn't have any more principles than a church or a cult. There are no principles in libertarianism. While claiming to want freedom, they see no problem with billionaire monopolists making infinite amounts of money, enslaving everybody else, demolishing the government and common projects and school systems, buying the entire media, and so forth. While arguing that people be allowed to keep 100% of their money, libertarians ignore the Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars completely unearned. They ignore that oil has been gushing out of the earth for the last 100 years unearned and enriching giant fortunes on the few. Libertarians' proposition that the 1,000 billionaires who rule the world earn their money is just absurd. So please, for the sake of your country, learn to recognize the hand of the ruling elite in these tax-cutting schemes and candidates like Ron Paul. It's basically vandalism. There are about 1,000 billionaires who are essentially sociopaths. They're incapable of being satisfied or ever retiring. They're willing to smash our education, culture, and common enterprises of humanity in colossal acts of betrayal just for more power and profits. Their behavior is highly repeated and highly predictable. So come on in out of the cold, Ron Paul people. Rejoin humanity. The government is not your enemy, it is your friend. Yes, government requires eternal vigilance. But there's no other real way forward. There's 7 billion people on Earth. So get involved and make government work for the people, please.